Well, thank you, all of you, for joining me tonight, this evening, actually, here to talk about the power of early intervention. And we will be talking about supporting children 0 to 3 years. And a huge thank you to Ricardo, that was the guy who just spoke, for his amazing marketing and tech skills. And to Megan Cabanilla, also a speech therapist like me, who helped develop this presentation. So I'm Dayna Thomas, and I'm so excited to know so many of you out there. I have been a speech language pathologist for 29 years, and I have to say, I love it just as much today as on day one, maybe even more. I have had the good fortune to work in early intervention a lot of my career. The bulk of my career has been in private practice. My husband and I founded a multidisciplinary clinic in Sacramento, California called Jabber Gym. Look it up online, jabbergym.com. And we had speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. We served, we had 2 clinics, and we served 16 to 20 districts all around that area. So now I am a proud member of the Point Quest group, where I get to do this and see your faces and talk about my favorite subjects on a pretty regular basis. So now on to early intervention. Okay, so my goal today is that you have clear takeaways that you can use as soon as tomorrow in your family, in your education, or in your profession. Our primary learning objectives are: 1, what is EI and what does it matter? So EI is early intervention, and I'm going to say that a lot. So I'm going to share the federal definition of early intervention, and then follow up with what I believe are the 5 primary outcomes for a successful EI program. So before we can provide effective early intervention, we need to identify the children who need support. That's where the child identification process comes in. 3, to have a program that's effective, we need an amazing early intervention team. And it's a team effort. No single professional can meet all the needs of a child, which is why collaboration is at the heart of this process and the heart of our entire profession. Today, our learning objective is to gain a clear understanding of the key roles and responsibilities of each team member. And by the end of this discussion, you will have a stronger grasp on who does what, how we can work together more effectively, and why each role is vital to the success of the family and child. Lastly, our last objective, number 4, family-centered services, which I believe is the most impactful outcome of our EI programs, as it recognizes that parents and caregivers, defined in this topic as the ones who are legally responsible for the child, are a child's first and most consistent teachers. So, okay, let's move on. So first, definitions. What is early intervention? To begin, it's a federal mandate that's defined as part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, well known as IDEA, in which services and supports are provided to infants and toddlers, ages birth to 3, with developmental delays or disabilities. The key note here is, and their families, infants and toddlers with developmental delays or disabilities and their families. So that's going to be a key part of our discussion today. Early intervention is designed to promote development in key areas such as cognition, physical, which is motor, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive skills. EI services must be family-centered, recognizing the vital role of caregivers. It must be individualized based on the Individualized Family Service Plan, otherwise known as the IFSP. It must be provided in the natural environment, such as the home or community or wherever the child and family most live. And it has to be collaborative, involving the whole team. So the ultimate goal of early intervention is to minimize developmental delays, enhance family capacity, and improve long-term outcomes by providing support as early as possible during critical development years. So in my opinion, the absolute most important wording in this mandate is services must be. Not services can be, not services should be, but must be provided. So that's why it's called a mandate. Okay, so that's the definition for you. So now we've defined early intervention. It's time to talk about why it matters. So the first question is, why are EI services especially impactful during the first few years of life? And that's why it's called early intervention. Much of our knowledge comes from scientific research into a child's developing brain, specifically with brain plasticity. So you're going to get a little bit of a research project today from me. Plasticity refers to the brain's ability to change, adapt, and reorganize itself in response to experiences, learning, and environmental influences. In a child's early years, neural connections form at a rapid rate, especially in the areas of language, motor skills, and social emotional development. A child's brain is highly adaptable, meaning that intervention strategies introduced early can shape neural pathways to optimize long-term growth. And a child's brain is flexible so that they can learn new skills faster and compensate for challenges more effectively than when they're older. Like me, I think mine moves slowly now. And what's so interesting is that if intervention is delayed, certain neural pathways may become harder to modify, making learning more difficult. So there you go. There's your research for today. So by early identification and intervention, we can maximize developmental potential, improve long-term outcomes, reduce need for intensive support later in a child's life, which is helpful on so many levels, enhances social and emotional well-being, and supports families and caregivers. So that is why EI matters so much. So let's dive a little bit deeper and discuss some of the key points about IDEA Part C. What does it say about early intervention? Well, we're going to talk about identification, assessment, and eligibility, the Individualized Family Service Plan, the IFSP, the natural environment, and we're going to talk about family involvement. Let's begin with the process in which a child is identified for EI services, how the family is introduced into the EI team, and finally, implementation of services. So let's start with referral. Anyone concerned about a child's development, parents, pediatricians, child care workers, can make a referral to their local early intervention program or Part C agency under IDEA. This is important because it's not named that. Each state generally has their own referral system, such as Early Start in California or Early Steps in Louisiana. So it will be your job to figure out in your state who's in charge of these programs. Some states have automatic referrals for infants at high-risk kids like premature or low birth weight babies, or children diagnosed with conditions like Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. Often a referral can result from a developmental screening. For example, you go into the doctor, for your wellness check, and they might do an ages and stages questionnaire. They might do an autism checklist, depending on possible red flags that are observed. And after a referral is made, an EI program representative, often called a service coordinator, reaches out to the family, meets them in their natural environment, and ultimately obtains consent if they decide that they want to go forward with an evaluation. So then the evaluation takes place in the child's natural environment and utilizes a multidisciplinary team. So let's skip to the next slide and talk about the team. Okay, please note, and this is the main point of the whole webinar, the center of the circle, the center of the flower is the family. They are the focus, and all decisions for the child are made with their consent. I want to be clear that when I use the term family, again, I'm assuming that they have legal responsibility for the child in the terms of the making decisions in an IFSP. So, first team member is usually the service coordinator, and they generally work for the EI agency. and they are the first point of contact with the family. So somebody sends a referral, the service coordinator contacts the family, and they just meet each other and find out, what are we going to do for the next steps? So they might decide with the family's consent to go forward with a screening or an evaluation. And the multidisciplinary team then begins to participate. After the service coordinator is generally, and this is not a hard and fast rule for all of these, it's very individual to each child, but a developmental specialist, sometimes called a child development specialist, sometimes called an infant development specialist, but a developmental specialist are often the primary person on the team that evaluates the child's overall skills in the 5 domains that we're going to be looking at, as well as serves as the coordinator to the other specialists as needed. So these might include the speech therapist, who works on communication, language, social skills / pragmatics. Might be the occupational therapist, who may look at a child with fine motor issues, or they may be talking about sensory integration challenges, or the physical therapist, who might be working on ambulatory skills or big gross motor skills. So, and this team could be as large as is needed, depending on the specific needs of the family. So, for example, it could be an advocate. It may be a respite worker. It may be a counselor. They may bring in, nursing to help with the family. So it very much is individualized to the child and their family being the key term. So now I'm going to jump to the 5 domains. So just like we need a person or a team that can assess the 5 domains, can determine present levels about the 5 domains, and can then work toward progress in the 5 domains, I want to explain pretty much what Part C says as the primary, areas that we're going to work on with these children. So let's start with cognitive development. And I could do a whole webinar on just this, and then also on specific ways to write goals. And we may do that in the future. But today I'm just going to give some examples so you have in your head what it might look like to write a goal for each of these domains. So what is cognitive development? Well, it's thinking and problem solving. This domain refers to how a child learns, processes information, and solves problems. So examples might be paying attention, exploring objects, imitating actions, which also could be communication. These are all underdeveloped. Remembering routines, and maybe cause and effect reasoning. So these skills are important because they lay the foundation for learning, academic success, and decision-making. So each time I go through a domain, I'm going to tell you why I think it's important in the developmental realm. And just as an example, I'm going to give you the words to write a goal. And if you're an IEP person, you're in the schools, you're going to notice that the goals are written a little bit differently than in an IEP, because we're going to talk about things that happen in the child's daily routines, but that's coming up in some other slides. So we'll go over that in a minute. So here's an example goal of cognition, and we're going to talk about Sally. So by the end of 6 months, that's our timeline, right? So these are measurable. Sally will demonstrate increased problem-solving skills by completing a 3-piece puzzle independently during structured play with minimal prompting. So similar to an IEP, we set up the stage, we say how long what they're going to do, and how are we going to measure it. And we're going to do that for all of the 5 domains when we write goals, if they're necessary, if there's deficits in these domains for a child on an IFSP. So communication, that is defined as understanding and expressing language. And obviously, since I'm a speech language pathologist, this is what I specialize in. So it might be receptive language, which is understanding words, gestures, and sounds. It might be expressive language, using words to speak, facial expressions to communicate something to others. Examples include babbling, pointing, responding to their name, forming words and sentences, understanding directions, and nonverbal cues. So it matters because strong communication skills support social interactions, learning, and self-expression. So it's very different than maybe when you're at a school setting and you are saying, this child will produce this amount of words, in long sentence and over time. We're very much talking about what are the beginning skills that a 0 to 3 child might have. So you gotta really think in a different way. So a goal would be by the end of 6 months, Sally will use 5 new words to express needs and wants during daily routines such as mealtime or playtime with minimal prompting. So we've given a place where they can practice, and we've given a goal for us to try to achieve. Then fine and gross motor skills. This is the physical part that's identified in Part C that involves movement, coordination, physical health. And so gross motor skills are using large muscle groups, crawling, walking, running. Fine motor skills are small muscles for tasks like grasping objects, holding utensils, eating with their fork, buttoning clothes, all things that can be practiced during a child's daily routine. So why it matters. Physical development supports independence, exploration, and participation in daily activities. So a goal would be by the end of 6 months, the child will demonstrate improved fine motor skills by using a pincer grasp to pick up small objects, such as Cheerios or blocks with 80% accuracy during playtime. So what's interesting right now is if I was to think, what team member might be best to work on fine and gross motor skills? Well, it depends, because an occupational therapist might assess, they might determine challenges with the fine motor, skill of picking things up. But a developmental clinician can also work on all of those skills. So we identify what the deficit is, what the needs are, and then the whole team can work on those similar skills. The speech therapist can be working on her communication skills, knowing that this child is also working on grasping with his or her fingers. So this is not in isolation. It can be multidisciplinary, where we all come together, but it can also be transdisciplinary, where one therapist is doing the same kinds of things or the similar practice as another therapist. And we call that transdisciplinary. And it's very effective in early intervention. So I'll go a little bit, I won't go totally into social emotional, but it's relationships and self-regulation, how children interact with others, how they regulate emotions and develop social skills. Examples might be smiling, making eye contact, playing with peers, expressing emotions. And it matters because healthy social emotional relationships are key with coping with emotions and succeeding in group settings like school. So we're always looking forward for these kiddos. Lastly, self-help or adaptive skills. And these are basically activities of daily living. They refer to skills needed for everyday life and independence. And you have to kind of step back and think, what does a 1-year-old need to succeed in everyday life and achieve some level of independence? Well, it's a really good, you really are talking to the parent. You're figuring out what is working in their life. You're figuring out how to help this child be as independent as possible. So, okay, well, that is our 5 domains that we identify as part of our IFSP. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about, I think I lost a slide here. That's okay. So a little bit about the IFSP, which is the Individualized Family Service Plan. So after, I'm going to pop back to the screen really quick. Oh, I can't, never mind. It's not on mine. Sorry, Ricardo. Okay, so we're just going to stay here. So the IFSP is the meeting or the plan where all of the services are developed. So we decided there was a referral. We decided that we have consent and we're going to do an evaluation. Then The team decides, is this child eligible or not? If they are eligible, then the team gets together and they develop the ISP, which is a written plan outlining services and goals for infants and toddlers receiving EI services. So it is family-centered. The key components are understanding the child's present developmental levels and what progress do we want to see, right? Later on. We want to hear the family's priorities and concerns. The things that a family might consider a huge priority, the things they want to work on most, we might not know unless we ask those very specific questions. We want to talk about the services that are required. Are we going to start with a developmental specialist, or do we think that a speech language pathologist is the primary person who is going to be working on this team? And there's nothing to say that over time an IFSP can't be changed. So for example, if initially the family is not as concerned about picking things up with their fingers, they might want to add a service later on, and that's absolutely okay. It can be a flexible model that, just like an IEP, that you can call at any time. So we want to talk about outcomes and progress monitoring. We're going to establish those goals, and then we're going to see I'm talking fast. How is that child doing over time? How are they doing at a 3-month level? How are they doing at a 6-month level? And what are we going to do next year? Are they going to keep the same services or have different services? Do they need a new provider or a different provider? And eventually, as the child is turning 3, this is the federal, which is 0 to 3, we're going to have a transition plan, which facilitates the child and the family moving into the 3 to 22 realm of the school district. Okay. So now as we move into the service portion, so now we've decided that our little person is going to be in an early intervention program, and they are going to have services provided by a team. Now we need to make sure that the team is family-centered. And how do we do that? There are 5 primary principles describing family-centered services in early intervention. The first is collaboration with the families. Professionals work alongside families. Alongside is the key word. They are not providing the services and the families are watching. They are providing services alongside the families to develop goals, strategies, and interventions that align with the family's values, routines, and priorities. Not what the therapist wants to happen, but what the family needs to happen to make their child in their home the most successful. Then we want to make sure that implementation takes place in a child's natural environment with a child's natural toys and resources. So this would be services that take place in a familiar setting, such as the home, the daycare, the childcare, the community, making learning effective and meaningful. And they're more likely to generalize using the things that they know the best, the things that are easiest for them. So they need individualized support. Services are tailored to meet the unique needs of each family, considering cultural, linguistic, and personal circumstances, and they must be culturally responsive, meaning recognizing, respecting, and incorporating the diverse cultural values, beliefs, and practices of families when providing services. It ensures that EI professionals adapt their approaches to align with the family's cultural background, language, and traditions, even if it's not similar to their own. And this is something, I worked in early intervention for a lot of years. And the neatest part for me, the part that I enjoyed the very most, was having the honor to be invited into a family's daily life. That they trusted me enough to sit with their family in their home as it was. And this is something that you're going to practice over time, because you might encounter expected and unexpected routines or behaviors in the child's home that might not align with your expectations as to how a service should happen. So for example, if I was in my clinic setting and I was the speech therapist and the family came into my therapy room with my therapy toys, it's going to be the way, I would be providing services the way that I chose, right, in that setting, because it was set up for me. That's not how early intervention is. And that is something that every professional in this field must recognize. So, what if we find something unexpected? What do? One, we have to look at ourselves. Is it something that we should be bothered about? Or is this something that is so comfortable for the family that we're not going to talk about that? We're not going to change that. So, a perceived roadblock, very different than a clinic setting. Okay, maybe the family comes in with 3 other siblings. In a traditional old way, which is not approved and not evidence-based, we might send the mom out to the waiting room with the brothers. That is not what we are doing in a home setting. We are learning, if there's no babysitter, that child and its siblings are his natural environment. And we are going to do everything we can as providers to make sure that all of the people in that room, that their needs are met, that the mom is comfortable having the other children there, that everybody has a job or a task, and that you're playing with everyone, because this is how the parent is going to have to teach the family when you leave. So other roadblocks might be a dog that jumps up on you. Okay, if you're allergic to dogs and you don't like dogs, then you're probably going to have a boundary that says, hey, next time, I'm so sorry, I have a huge fear of dogs. Is there any way that, we could put Fido in a different room? Hopefully that doesn't offend the family, but with that open communication and that trust that you've built, it shouldn't be a problem. It might be something else. Maybe this actually happened to me. The carpet was very, very dirty. I realized it made me very uncomfortable. So the next time, I had new strategies. I brought in the magic parachute, where we all sat on the parachute to keep the child in a safe and happy spot. And I didn't have to sit on the carpet that made me uncomfortable. There may be things that are more significant. Maybe you see something like a significant spanking, or you see, even though pot is, in California is legal, it's not legal in front of, in a child's space. So those are things where you say, okay, I'm a mandated reporter. This is something that I understand. I want to be culturally responsible, but this is not safe for the child, and it is my responsibility to report that. So there's just so many levels of understanding the family and being trusted to be a part of their families. So my favorite slide. Okay, so how do we do it? Now that we are in a family home, we have goals. We know what we're doing. I want to show you or give you an example of something. So I have been doing this a long time, and I used to have, I was trained in a very traditional way to do early intervention. Before, how does it go? When we know better, we do better. So I thought I was doing the very best at the time. I would go to the family's home. I would carry my giant bag up the stairs to the apartment. I would open up my bag. I would take out the fanciest toy, and I would sit there and we would play, and the mom would maybe play, but I didn't engage her. I wasn't next to her or the father. I was playing with the child while they kind of watched. And I would bring out this fancy toy, and likely, very often I was able to get the child to do something that I wanted the child to do that maybe the mom and dad hadn't been able to do before. So they were amazed. The child, maybe of something as simple as, imitating more, but, I looked like a magician, right? Well, guess what I did? Then when my services were over, I put my fancy magic talking toy back in my bag. I put my bag over my back, and I marched back down the stairs. The next week I come into the house, and the mom says, "You're so amazing. I couldn't get my child to talk all week. I can't do it without you." So I would love you to put in the chat how you would feel if you were that parent. What if I brought my toys and then I took them home, and I was the only person that could make that child talk? Tell me how that parent feels. So, and Ricardo, you can throw out some of the comments if you don't mind.
Yes, helpless, defeated, like a bad parent, maybe not good enough, not great, defeated, maybe even some feelings of jealousy as well, failing my child, feeling frustrated.
Yep. All of those things. And I walked out of there back in the days thinking, wow, I did such a good job. I got him to talk today. Knowing what I know now, I know for a fact that parent coaching and is evidence-based and it works and it's right. And that is why I like to share these best practices that we use now. So definition, it's the way in which the team provides guidance to the family to empower them to be their child's best teacher. They're in charge. So strategies might be following the child's lead by observing and engaging in activities in their home, in their natural environment. Not bringing in your fancy toys, but going to their toy box or going to their measuring cup drawer or whatever it is that's in the home that's familiar to the child. It might be natural teaching moments, embedding learning into daily routines, which we're going to talk about next, and scaffolding skills like I do, we do, you do. If I would love to tell you all about the Hannon program. If you are just new into earlier intervention, I learned so much by the Hannon program. I bought all their books, and it was just a really easy way to teach parents strategies, and it was really good for strategies for me. So I recommend that. And probably in the chat, you guys, if you have wonderful resources, please put those in the chat for all the people that are on this, because I would love to share. And I know there's so much out there right now. Okay. So now I want to talk about coaching and early intervention. We said it's in the natural environment. We said it's with the child's familiar toys, what's the familiar things in the environment. But there's a whole evidence-based group of information about routines-based intervention. RBI, you hear it called RBI, routines-based intervention. Basically, you are working with the child alongside the parent in their daily routines. It might be bath time. It might be dressing. It might be snack time. It might be going for a walk. And what you're doing is you've identified with the parent, what are the things that are the most difficult? And if you ask, here's some really good advice. If you ask the question, how are things? And you leave it open-ended like that, almost always it's going to be like, oh, we're fine. But when you're part of the family and you are needing to know specifics, you ask things like, how is Sally doing when she gets in the car? I heard last time she had a tantrum when you put her seatbelt on. And that, the mom says, oh yeah, that is the worst thing in our daily routine. I've stopped going to Target. I have to have the babysitter watch her because the car seat routine is ruining our life. Okay, so you have just found out that everything's not quite fine. That is a priority for that mom. So this is why routines-based intervention works. So what do? You say to the parent, you know what I'd love to do this week? I know this is one of your priorities. So why don't we break down all the things around getting in that car seat? When does Sally get upset? At what point does she start to tantrum? Is there anything that she really wants that might calm her down so that you can get to Target? And then you brainstorm with that parent. And slowly but surely, well, hopefully, the goal is that you've broken down the skill enough that the child can do it in small parts until she can make it and generalize it as a whole. So that's kind of how routines-based intervention works. So you're incorporating familiar routines, you're teaching skills naturally instead of isolated drills. So, for example, if you're a speech therapist out there and we're working on articulation or sound, we're working on creating sounds that are difficult, we might use isolated drills. We might do the same sound over and over and try to, get some really good quality sounds. And that takes a lot of drill. And that's not what we're doing here. Here we are teaching skills in their natural routine. It encourages parent and caregiver involvement. by facilitating consistent practice throughout the week. And it builds on small successes, motivating both the child and the parent. And then we ask next week, or we ask that night, I know you had to go to your other child's play. How did it work when you put Sally in the car seat tonight? And it may be great, and it may be that she observed some situations that you're going to work on next week. So on the right are other strategies, modeling, again, scaffolding, I do, we do, you do, visual supports, especially for a child who has trouble with transitions, visual supports like first we play video game, or first we eat our food, then we play video games. And also always giving a child choices. If you give them choices that you're in control of, they don't take choices that they're controlling in their control. So anyway, and always reinforcement and praise, always positive, always strength-based. We never say, oh, your child is having a hard time or is not doing, what I wanted him to do, or he can't do it. What you're doing is you are observing and then explaining what the child can do. As long as you do that, you're never going to go wrong. Okay, so that's routine-based intervention, and there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Oops. Can you hear me? There's a whole bunch of stuff out there where you can get tons of research. And so now we have a wonderful video that talks about the therapist alongside the mother. Here we go. Thank you, Ricardo.
You try. Saw you hop. So Lexi, already you've said blue truck so many times with this book, so that's perfect. And I like how you're finding other, like the frog, you're finding other things to label repetitively, and you're giving them a little bit of a role by asking them, what does the frog say? Can you jump like a frog? So you're creating that interest around it.
Susie is amazing. I couldn't imagine doing this journey without her because she's been so super helpful. She listens to me giving the boys a snack. She listens to me playing with the boys, and she always has strategies and suggestions on how I can improve their language. Just little comments that help me think about how I'm talking to Connor and Jackson.
What is that? The truck. What color is he? Ooh. Oh, can you see the cow? Good job. The cow says moo.
Okay, so as I watch this video, there are certainly some things that I would do a little bit differently. If I was the clinician, I would probably sit down on the floor. I would not make my notepad so obvious, it seems a little too clinical, but there are always things that we can do differently to make the family feel as comfortable as possible. And then, I did love her feedback. I loved how you did this. I loved how you reinforced those words. A lot of times we say the power of three. If you have the ability to say the same word or the same concept 3 times in an interaction, that's a way for a child to really generalize a skill. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this webinar. I loved talking about this topic. So our summary is that early intervention is crucial for positive developmental outcomes. Parent and family coaching empowers caregivers to be their child's best teacher. Services in the natural environment with their familiar, whatever's in their environment provides the best generalization of skills and outcomes. This is a federal and state law. It's not a suggestion. The IFSP ensures individualized family-focused support that takes into account a child's culture and their specific requests and needs for their child, and that all of you educators out there play a key role in supporting IFSP goals and really creating relationships with these families. And I can tell you that I've been in this profession so long that I have families that I worked with in early intervention when they were in the birth to 3 realm, and I knew them through school, and now I know them as adults. So I can tell you that when you're in a home, you are creating relationships. And I just wish you the very best. So if you have any questions, you can always email me directly. Jabberjim and Point Quest have an amazing ability to answer any questions about early intervention, and hope to see you soon.